Decentralization is one of the cornerstones of cryptocurrency, but it's not something that any crypto project currently has. This is because the networks we use to interact with cryptocurrencies are owned and operated by centralized service providers. The solution here is simple, and that's to create decentralized peer-to-peer networks using cryptocurrency. Now today I'm going to tell you how Helium is doing exactly that, and why its peer-to-peer 5G could make HNT one of the most valuable cryptocurrencies. Before we begin, there is something you need to know.
There is no financial advice in this video. Contact a financial advisor for help with your portfolio. If you're new to the Coin Bureau, my name is Guy, and this Helium really helps rhyming on the go. This channel contains crypto content of the highest quality. Coins, tokens, news, reviews, exchanges, and anything crypto-related that comes to me. If this is what you're here for, subscribe to the channel and ping that notification bell to get more. You can use the timestamps below to skip around. Just remember that watching the whole way through will help this video get found. So, now that you know my intents, let me tell you how Helium could decentralize the internet.
Helium was founded in 2013 by Sean Fanning, Sean Carey, and Amir Halim. If the first name sounds familiar, that's because Sean Fanning is the co-founder of Napster, the first peer-to-peer music sharing platform which amassed over 27 million users in its short 3-year lifespan. Sean currently serves as an advisor to Helium, likely because he has half a dozen other startups on the go. Sean Carey is a seasoned systems architect, and he served as Helium's CTO until he stepped down in 2015. Sean's presentation about Helium at Hardwired NYC is the oldest video about the project that I could find, and it's worth checking out if you have the time. It's down in the description. Amir Halim is a professional gamer and video game designer, and he was once the best Quake player in the world. Respect. He currently sits as Helium's CEO and is a die-hard cypherpunk. Now, according to Amir, Helium was the outcome of one of the many conversations he had with Napster Sean over the years after meeting him in 2005. They basically wanted to recreate the peer-to-peer model of Napster with wireless networks and without the risk of being shut down for breaking laws like Napster did with copyright. Initially, they were hoping to target the telecommunications market, but realized that the red tape would make it next to impossible, and the existing players had too much financial and political power. At the time, the concept of the Internet of Things, or IoT, was becoming increasingly popular as wireless devices were becoming more common. IoT is the buzzword of all buzzwords these days, and it basically consists of extracting data from the real world using sensors. These sensors include things like laptops, mobile phones, parking meters, and even dog collars. Amir had some friends who had tried and failed to get IoT projects off the ground, and he realized that IoT companies were failing because creating IoT infrastructure in a centralized manner made zero economic sense. The low frequency used for IoT also has no laws, licensing, or regulations attached, at least in the United States, where Helium was based. This made IoT the perfect fit for Helium's peer-to-peer network. The only problem is that Helium had no way to incentivize people to set up this peer-to-peer IoT network, and the whole project stalled as a result. When crypto started making headlines in 2016, however, Amir realized that cryptocurrency could create the right incentives. After being inspired by the Filecoin white paper in 2017, Amir rallied the gang and they got to work. In June 2019, Helium revealed its first physical Helium hotspot devices, which would power its peer-to-peer IoT infrastructure. Helium's mainnet went live 1 month later, creating the cryptocurrency coin which would incentivize people to join their new decentralized network. So, how the hell does Helium work? Helium essentially consists of three things: helium hotspots, the helium console, and the helium blockchain. Helium hotspots are like the routers you use for Wi-Fi. The difference is that helium hotspots don't transmit a Wi-Fi signal. They transmit a, quote, long-fi signal similar to radio. This gives helium hotspots a range of dozens and even hundreds of kilometers compared to the measly 50-meter range most Wi-Fi routers have. This makes it easy to transmit small packets of data to, from, and between any supported wireless devices which fall within the range of a helium hotspot. The low signal frequency used by helium hotspots also means that they use next to no energy and take next to no energy from the devices they communicate with. Best of all, the instructions to make a helium hotspot are open source, meaning you could make your own helium hotspot from scratch if you really wanted. As of December 2020, manufacturers can also apply with the helium community to mass-produce hotspots of their own. And more than 13 companies have successfully done so to date. Because helium hotspots are connected to the internet, this makes it possible for developers to request data from any compatible devices which fall within the range of the helium network. Individuals and organizations can also deploy their own helium-compatible devices to do things like supply chain management and, in the case of Lime, track the status of electric scooters. All this data can be accessed, requested, and managed using the Helium console, which can be easily integrated with popular platforms such as Google Drive and Microsoft Azure. Fetching data from Helium hotspots costs cryptocurrency, and this is where the Helium blockchain comes in. The Helium blockchain was built from the ground up, and it uses a novel consensus mechanism based on Honeybadger BFT, which is specially designed to support nodes with a spotty connection. This is needed because not all Helium hotspots are always online. It's also possible that a Helium hotspot that's part of the consensus group could go offline in the middle of validating a block. In addition to Honeybadger BFT, Helium runs a sort of secondary consensus mechanism called proof of coverage, which is Helium's primary incentive structure. As the name suggests, proof of coverage involves checking whether a Helium hotspot is broadcasting a long-fi signal or not. This check is done by a randomly selected Helium hotspot within the range of the Helium hotspot which is being challenged. This encourages network participants to set up their hotspots so that their signal range overlaps with others nearby. Isolated hotspots can still earn rewards, but not nearly to the same extent. If a Helium hotspot passes the proof of coverage challenge, both the challenger and the challengee earn a portion of block rewards. Hundreds, if not thousands, of proof of coverage challenges are taking place at any given time around the world. The large percentage of block rewards allocated to Helium hotspot operations have made hosting one quite lucrative. Now, this is a big part of why there are over 200,000 Helium hotspots and counting. Now, in addition to Helium hotspots, there are two other sets of network participants which earn block rewards. One of these is Helium's validators. Validators are a recent addition to Helium, and they were brought in because the rapid growth of the Helium network was making it harder for hotspots to effectively participate in the Honeybadger-based consensus. Helium validators must stake exactly 10,000 HNT, which is nearly $200,000 at the time of shooting. Staking more or less than 10,000 HNT is not allowed, and delegation is not possible. Staking rewards vary according to the amount of HNT being staked, with the highest staking reward being 360% per year. Although validators can withdraw their staking rewards every 15 minutes or so, the 10,000 HNT they staked has a staggering 5-month unlock period. Validators must be online at all times, and a failure to do so will result in fewer block rewards and other penalties, though slashing is not one of them, at least not yet. Now, even with these high barriers to entry and harsh conditions, Helium has attracted more than 2,700 validators and counting, with staking rewards sitting slightly south of 7% per year as a result. Now, the third set of network participants that earn Helium block rewards are Helium's investors and Helium Inc., the software company behind Helium. And that is a perfect segue into HNT's tokenomics. HNT is the native cryptocurrency of the Helium blockchain. HNT has a maximum supply of 223 million and there was no pre-mine and no ICO. This means HNT's supply started from zero, and in the first 2 years, a total of 120 million HNT were minted. Helium recently saw its first halving event, which cut this annual emission down to 30 million. HNT's emission will continue to be cut in half every 2 years until the maximum supply is reached, and at the current pace, this should take about 50 years. As I mentioned a few moments ago, newly minted HNT are divided between Helium hotspots, validators, Helium Inc., and investors. The percentage of newly minted HNT that these participants earn will also change over time. Specifically, the amount of HNT given to the team, investors, and proof of coverage rewards will decline, and the lion's share will be given to Helium hotspots handling data requests from developers. Now, even though there was no ICO for HNT, Helium Inc. did sell security tokens to investors. HNT rewards earmarked for Helium Inc. and investors are allocated according to how many security tokens they hold. So, as a simple example, if Helium Inc. holds 50% of Helium's security tokens, they will get 17.5% of all newly minted HNT. That's half of the 35% that's currently allocated to that portion of the block reward pie. This clever architecture allowed Helium to raise over $145 million from token sales without actually conducting any ICOs. Those investors just purchase the security tokens that guarantee them a portion of future block rewards. Now, if that wasn't crazy enough, HNT technically isn't used to pay for network fees. All transaction fees on Helium are paid in data credits, including fetching data from devices connected to Helium hotspots. Data credits are created by burning HNT, and data credits are pegged to the US dollar at a ratio of 100,000 to 1. So this means that burning $1 in HNT will create 100,000 data credits. Data credits are non-transferable and cannot be converted back to HNT. This makes HNT a deflationary cryptocurrency. To ensure Helium Network's participants are sufficiently incentivized after the last HNT coin is mined, the Helium community recently passed a proposal to enable net emissions. Now, net emissions essentially involve taking a small portion of data credits and converting them back into HNT. Net emissions are currently 1% per year and will rise when demand for data credits is low and fall when demand for data credits is high. Now, the real question is what effect HNT's elaborate tokenomics will have on its price, and I reckon the answer here is quite clear. HNT has been in a sustained uptrend for over a year, and this uptrend accelerated in April when the Helium community voted to introduce support for 5G infrastructure. After a few quiet months, HNT spiked again in August, and this was for many reasons. First, there was the HNT halving, which took place on August the 6th. On August the 10th, Helium announced that Andreessen Horowitz had led a massive VC funding round for HNT, which totaled over $111 million and featured other big names such as Alameda Research. On August the 31st, FreedomFi announced that it would be the first to manufacture Helium hotspots with 5G support. The first 5G Helium hotspot was delivered just a few days ago, and FreedomFi hopes to have 20,000 5G-enabled Helium hotspots set up by the end of the year. Given that Helium has onboarded over 150,000 hotspots for its IoT network in less than a year, we will see at least the same amount of exponential growth for its 5G network, and probably much more. This is because the demand for 5G couldn't be higher, and there's only one reason why 5G hasn't reached mass adoption yet. As highlighted by Helium founder Amir Halim, centralized 5G infrastructure is running into the same bottlenecks as IoT infrastructure. Now, for those who don't know, 5G signal has a very short range, and this signal is easily disrupted. Something as minimal as too much humidity in a room could be enough to cut a 5G connection. This means 5G towers need to be installed on almost every single home for 5G to be usable, and the cost of setting up this kind of infrastructure in a centralized manner is too damn high. That's why Helium's goal is to incentivize people to run their own 5G towers and earn passive income for providing that service. Now, because the currency used to pay for this 5G connection will be HNT-derived data credits, this will increase the demand for HNT. If legacy internet service providers begin leveraging Helium as part of their own 5G infrastructure, as Amir recently hinted, this would turn the HNT demand dial up to 11. This would send HNT well past the moon and into the next galaxy. Now, with a market cap of under 2 billion, HNT could easily 10x within the next year, assuming the crypto market continues to rally. Besides 5G, Helium has a whole host of other milestones on the horizon. These can be found on the Helium GitHub as Helium Improvement Proposals, or HIPs. There are about a dozen HIPs currently being discussed, and a few are worth pointing out. The first is HIP 24, which wants Helium to introduce block reward splitting. This would make it possible for Helium hotspots to send their HNT rewards to multiple wallets instead of one. The second HIP worth pointing out is HIP 31, which wants Helium to introduce on-chain governance via HNT token locking. The proposed governance mechanism is quite robust, and I recommend giving it a read if you have time. Link will be in the description. The third HIP worth pointing out is HIP 33, which wants Helium to optimize hotspot rewards in certain regions, something which is arguably required given the different rules, regulations, and network resources around the world. The fourth HIP worth pointing out is HIP 34, which wants Helium to mask validator locations on the grounds that publicly broadcasting their IP could pose a security risk, and I reckon that's a reasonable concern. The fifth HIP worth noting is HIP 37, which wants Helium to adjust block rewards to sufficiently incentivize and compensate hotspots running other networks, including 5G. The sixth HIP worth pointing out is HIP 38, which wants Helium to allow validators to become oracles for the HNT data credit conversion rate, something which is currently done by just 9 unknown oracles. The seventh notable HIP is HIP 39, which wants Helium to redenominate HNT by a factor of 1,000, meaning one HNT would be split into 1,000 new HNT. The author of the HIP admits that redenomination has a habit of increasing price, so that's definitely something to keep in mind. Now, one HIP that seems to be missing is a scaling solution for the Helium blockchain, which will be required for it to sustain its exponential growth. And this conveniently brings me to the concerns I have about Helium. As incredible as Helium is, it has no shortage of competition from legacy network providers. The elephant in the room here is SpaceX's Starlink project, which is looking to bring the internet to the entire planet via satellite. To be fair, Starlink cannot provide the 5G speeds that Helium is hoping to host, and it's possible, if not likely, that the two could coexist. The question is whether enough people would care to use 5G if a functional connection is available without having to use a complicated cryptocurrency. In terms of IoT, Amazon seems to be dead set on becoming the king of the IoT industry with the Alexa devices, and something tells me that it took a few pages from Helium's playbook. I suspect this because Amazon announced Amazon Sidewalk in October 2019, just a few months after Helium's mainnet went live. Helium's code is open source, which would make it easy to copy. And Helium must have been on Amazon's radar too, because Google Ventures was one of Helium's early investors. Helium founder Amir Halim seems to suspect the same thing, because in 2017 he was saying open source all the way. Quote, "Almost entirely open source is what Helium's documentation says today." Keeping secrets close to your chest is best when you're trying to topple trillion-dollar tech giants, but it could also create some serious issues for Helium down the line. One thing that comes to mind is the classification of HNT as a security by US regulators, which is almost certainly the case. Heck, Helium literally has security tokens that are held by Helium Inc. and its investors. This could mean that HNT won't be listing on any US exchanges anytime soon, and that's where most traders and investors are located, including the ones that invested into Helium Inc. The solution is for Helium to become sufficiently decentralized, and that's probably why Amir has been very hesitant to answer any questions related to a roadmap. It would send a signal to regulators that Helium Inc. has retained control of Helium. This does seem to be the case though, and it's easy to understand why. Helium has been a massive success, and Helium Inc. could someday become one of the biggest companies in the world as a consequence. Handing over Helium to the community would be nothing short of crazy for Helium Inc. and its investors, which is why I think the proposal to introduce on-chain governance will pass. This will conveniently give control of the protocol over to HNT holders, and it's likely that Helium Inc. and its investors hold most of its supply, especially since they've been running hotspots since the start. This ties into another concern I have, and that's the potential privacy risks people could face for installing hotspot devices. I'll start by saying that all of the data transmitted over the Helium network is encrypted, and Helium Inc.'s own hotspots protect privacy to the fullest degree, as noted by Amir in many interviews. However, Helium's own documentation seems to imply that this isn't the case for all third-party hotspots, and it even recommends you do your own research so you know what you're getting into. The last real concern I have with Helium is the chip shortage that's currently going on. Some experts believe this chip shortage will continue for years, and this means hotspot costs could stay inflated for a very long time. Even though Helium's decentralized incentive structure makes 5G feasible, if the price tag for the hardware is too high, then not many people will be willing to participate. This could put pressure on Helium to increase HNT rewards going to 5G hotspots so they can easily make back the cost, but this could then put a strain on the hundreds of thousands of people who jumped on the LongFi train. The good news is that all these issues can and likely will be resolved in due course, and Helium will almost certainly continue to thrive. If Helium's peer-to-peer networks manage to reach global adoption, it will change the world forever, and it will make cryptocurrency truly unstoppable. That's just my 2 cents though, and if you folks have some thoughts about Helium, I would definitely love to know. Drop me a comment down below, and don't forget to click that like button before you go. Subscribe to the channel too, and ping that notification bell to make sure the next video gets to you. If you're looking for more, I have a second channel that you can explore. You can also find me on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, and you can get your dose of daily crypto updates by joining my Telegram. My weekly newsletter is where I lay out my master plan. You can see which videos are coming next and where my crypto holdings currently stand. And last but not least, you can consider purchasing a Coin Bureau hoodie or tee. The Coin Bureau merch store is where you'll find cool designs just like these. So just follow the link down below if you please. Thank you all so much for watching. It's been a pleasure as always. Until next time, you can't go wrong if you just keep calm and hodl on.